I waited for you." When the millionaire whispered these words in her ear that first night, the 23-year-old young woman never imagined her life would change forever. "Tell me, where are you watching from? What happened next defies all logic and will make you believe in true love again. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to discover this story that will leave you breathless." The September sun poured like liquid honey through the large windows of the Manhattan apartment, caressing the stacked books and half-empty coffee cups. Emily Walker, 32, contemplated the Hudson River from her small terrace, her fingers absently drumming on the wrought-iron railing. Her eyes, deep green like the forests of her New England childhood, seemed to search for something in the dance of boats gliding across the water. "Sometimes our greatest fears are merely the shadows of our deepest desires," her grandmother had told her before leaving her this apartment. These words still resonated within her like an unresolved prophecy. The phone rang, breaking her contemplation. Emily sighed, already knowing what this call meant. The family home in Newport, Rhode Island, the one she had fled 10 years ago, was finally claiming her return. Her sister Jessica spoke rapidly, words colliding with poorly disguised urgency. The family bookstore, inherited through 3 generations, was about to close permanently. "You need to come back, Emily. We can't make this decision without you." A heavy silence settled between the two sisters, laden with a decade of unspoken words and carefully maintained distances. "I'll be there tomorrow," Emily finally replied, her calm voice contrasting with the turmoil awakening within her. Hanging up, she observed her slightly trembling hands. How could she return there, to that town with stone mansions that seemed to have witnessed every beat of her adolescent heart, every tear, every abandoned dream? How could she face what she had left behind? The bookstore, the memories, and above all, him? The open suitcase on her bed seemed to mock her. Emily methodically arranged her clothes as if external order could compensate for internal chaos. A book slipped from her bedside table, an old collection of New England poetry that Michael had given her that summer so long ago. She hesitated, then slipped it between 2 blouses. In her bedroom mirror, Emily saw an accomplished woman, a respected editor for a major publishing house, independent, self-assured. Yet in the reflection, she also glimpsed the 22-year-old girl who had fled her hometown in the pouring rain, vowing never to return. The train to Boston would leave in a few hours, carrying her toward a past she thought buried. But some memories never truly die. They simply hibernate, waiting for the opportune moment to awaken again. The train sped through the American countryside, transforming landscapes into impressionist paintings that Emily observed distractedly. New York's urban sprawl gradually gave way to the rolling hills and eventually the rocky shores of Rhode Island. The air seemed to change, becoming charged with salt and memories. When she stepped onto the platform at the Kingston station, the familiar smell of the ocean struck her with a force she hadn't anticipated. Her heart tightened. This seaside town, with its historic mansions and colonial architecture, hadn't changed. It was she who was different. "Emily!" Jessica's voice echoed across the nearly deserted station. Her sister stood there, thinner than she remembered, her once long hair now cut in a severe bob that framed her tired face. The 2 women observed each other for a moment, like strangers searching for traces of familiarity before awkwardly embracing. "You came," Jessica murmured, as if she didn't really believe it. "I promised you I would," Emily replied, avoiding adding that it was perhaps the only promise she hadn't broken by leaving. The drive to the old family home was silent. Emily watched the streets she knew by heart pass by, the cafe where she once studied, the beach where she had learned to swim, the small local theater where she had kissed Michael for the first time. Each place revived echoes of her past. "Is the bookstore really in trouble?" Emily asked, finally breaking the silence. Jessica nodded, her hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. "Amazon, the big chains, the economic crisis. People don't buy like they used to. And then after Dad left last year for his retirement in Florida, I tried to modernize, but..." Her voice broke slightly. "I don't have your talent for choosing books that touch people." Emily felt a pang of guilt. She had abandoned the family business, leaving her sister to bear the burden alone. The car stopped in front of a facade of weathered New England clapboard adorned with a navy blue storefront. "Tidal Pages," read the sign in slightly flaking gold letters. The bookstore of her childhood, where she had learned to read, to dream, to escape. "I've kept your room intact," Jessica said, carrying Emily's suitcase up the narrow stairs that led to the apartment above the shop. "I thought you'd appreciate it." Emily didn't have the courage to tell her that this was precisely what she dreaded. Facing that room was like opening Pandora's box of her adolescence. The door opened onto a room bathed in twilight light. The nautical-themed wallpaper, the small wooden desk facing the window that overlooked the sea, the shelves crammed with books. Everything was exactly as she remembered. On the bedside table, a photo in a wooden frame. Emily and Michael, 17, smiling on Easton's beach, unaware of what the future held for them. "We have a meeting tomorrow morning with the accountant and the attorney," Jessica announced from the doorway. "To discuss the options." Emily nodded without turning around, unable to tear her gaze from the photograph. "Is he—" she began, before reconsidering. "Michael returned to settle here 3 years ago," Jessica replied, understanding the unfinished question. "He now runs the sailing school near the harbor. He's different." When the door closed, Emily sat on the bed, overwhelmed. She hadn't spoken his name aloud for years, but he had always been there, like an invisible scar that itched when it rained. From the window, she could see the sea darkening with the twilight. The waves crashed against the rocks, immutable, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in this small town. Emily wondered if she would have the courage to face not only the fate of the bookstore, but also the ghosts she had left behind. The next morning, the bell over the door tinkled softly as Emily entered the bookstore. A wave of nostalgia immediately overwhelmed her. The characteristic smell of paper, dust, and polished wood hadn't changed. The dark oak shelves rose to the ceiling, forming a literary labyrinth she could have navigated blindfolded. Her fingers brushed the spines of books as if greeting them. It was here, among these shelves, that she had discovered Hemingway and Fitzgerald, wept with Steinbeck and laughed with Twain. Each book seemed to contain not only its printed story, but also a fragment of her own. "You're early," Jessica noted as she emerged from the back room, a cup of coffee in hand. "The accountant doesn't arrive for another hour." "I wanted to rediscover the place," Emily admitted. "See what's changed." "Almost nothing," Jessica sighed. "Maybe that's the problem." Emily observed her sister more carefully. The circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights, probably spent trying to find a solution to save the family legacy. Jessica had always been the responsible one, the one who stayed, who took care of aging parents, who maintained traditions. Emily had been the adventurer, the uncontrollable one, the one who left to explore the world. "Show me the numbers," Emily asked. "The real ones, not the ones you presented to Dad so he could retire with peace of mind." Jessica hesitated, then pulled out a thick binder from under the counter. The pages were filled with columns of figures carefully annotated in her fine handwriting. Emily scanned them quickly. Her experience in publishing had taught her to decipher financial statements. The situation was worse than she had imagined. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" Emily asked, finally looking up from the file. "You had your life in New York," Jessica replied simply. "Your career, your friends. I didn't want to impose our problems on you." The "our" resonated like a silent reproach. "Our problems that you chose to abandon." "I think we could organize events," Emily proposed, closing the binder. "Readings, author meetings, use my network in publishing. Modernize the inventory system. Create a website for online sales too." "I've already tried all that," Jessica interrupted with a touch of annoyance. "People come to events, take photos for Instagram, but don't buy. They prefer to order online, cheaper, delivered to their home the next day." The bell over the entrance tinkled again. Emily froze as she recognized the silhouette framed in the doorway. Michael Bennett stood there, taller than she remembered, his face weathered by sun and sea salt. His brown hair was shorter, and a light beard shadowed his once smooth jaw. But his eyes, that particular ocean blue, hadn't changed. "Jessica, I have the brochures for the partnership with the sailing school." He stopped short upon seeing Emily. His face passed through a range of emotions in a few seconds: surprise, confusion, and something Emily couldn't identify. "Emily," he finally said, her name sounding strange in his mouth, like a word from a long-forgotten foreign language. "Michael," she responded, striving to keep her voice neutral. Jessica looked alternately at her sister and Michael, then murmured an excuse about documents to prepare before disappearing into the back room, leaving them alone in a deafening silence. "I heard about the bookstore," Michael said, advancing. "I'm sorry." Emily nodded, unable to find the right words. How could she speak normally to someone who had once known every corner of her soul, every secret, every dream? "You look well," he continued awkwardly. "So do you," she automatically replied. "Jessica told me you now run the sailing school." A ghost of a smile passed over his face. "The sea has always been my refuge. After my return from New Zealand, it was the logical continuation." Emily felt her heart tighten at the mention of that distant country where Michael had disappeared after their breakup. He had gone seeking adventure, oblivion perhaps, exactly as she had done in New York. "I should go," he said, depositing the brochures on the counter. "But if you need help with the bookstore, anything, many people here would like to see it survive." As he was about to leave, he hesitated, then added, "It's good to see you again, Emily. Really." The door closed behind him, leaving Emily with a strange feeling of emptiness. She looked at the brochures he had brought, a collaboration project between the sailing school and the bookstore, offering books about the sea and navigation. It was at that moment that the first real obstacle materialized in her mind: how to save the bookstore without losing herself again in this past from which she had fled. How to remain professional and detached when every corner of this town, every familiar face inevitably brought her back to what she had once been. The meeting with the accountant, a stern-faced man named Mr. Thompson, confirmed Emily's worst fears. The bookstore had 3 months before closure became inevitable. 3 months to accomplish a miracle. "There is a purchase offer," the attorney announced as they finished reviewing the options. "A national chain of standardized bookstores wants to acquire the property. The location is ideal, right in the heart of the historic tourist district." Emily saw Jessica's face fall. Selling would mean the end of a family story, the disappearance of a place that had nourished the imaginations of generations of Newport residents. "I refuse," Emily declared with a firmness that surprised even her. "Give us these 3 months, we'll turn the situation around." In the afternoon, after the 2 men had left, the sisters remained face to face in the deserted bookstore. The silence was heavy, laden with everything they hadn't said for 10 years. "Why did you leave?" Jessica suddenly asked, the question bursting forth as if she could no longer contain it. "You had everything here, the bookstore, Michael who adored you, friends, a family." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. How could she explain the suffocation she had felt? How could she make her sister understand that love could sometimes be a cage, even a gilded one? "I felt like I was just a reflection in the eyes of others," she replied softly. "The Walker girl, Michael's girlfriend, Jessica's sister. I no longer knew who I was. Me, Emily. And now do you know?" Jessica's tone was almost accusatory. Emily hesitated. In New York, she had built an identity, a career, a life. But hadn't she simply replaced one definition with another? "I know what I no longer want to be," she finally replied. "And I want to save this bookstore, not out of duty, but because it deserves to exist." That night, unable to find sleep in her old room, Emily quietly descended to the bookstore. She turned on a small lamp at the counter and began to walk the aisles, noting which sections could be reorganized, which spaces could be redesigned. Her gaze fell on the poetry section, particularly sparse. Once it had been the beating heart of the bookstore, the section their father cherished above all. Emily remembered the evening readings, when residents would crowd into the shop to listen to poems declaimed by passionate voices. She sat on the floor back against a shelf and let the memories wash over her. Michael and she, teenagers, hiding among these same shelves to kiss far from her father's watchful eye. Jessica, immersed in a novel, forgetting the outside world for hours. Her mother gone too soon, arranging bouquets of wildflowers in vases placed on the counter. The bookstore wasn't just a business. It was the beating heart of their family, a place where printed stories mingled with their personal stories. The following morning, Emily presented Jessica with a detailed action plan. She had spent the night developing it, drawing on her editorial and marketing experience. "We'll theme the bookstore around New England's maritime identity," she explained animatedly. "Create a space dedicated to local legends, sea stories, regional history. Something that no national chain could offer." Jessica seemed skeptical, but agreed to trust her. In the days that followed, they worked tirelessly, reorganizing shelves, ordering new books, repainting certain sections of the shop in shades evoking the sea and New England skies. Emily contacted her connections in the publishing world, organizing events with local authors. She created a social media page for the bookstore, posting photos of literary treasures they possessed, telling the story of this unique place. But despite all their efforts, customers remained scarce. The weekend approached, and with it, the first major event they had organized, an evening of New England maritime tales. If this failed, their momentum would be broken before it had truly begun. It was then that one evening, as Emily was working late at the bookstore, the entrance bell rang. Michael stood in the doorway carrying a large box. "Jessica told me about your storytelling evening," he said. "I thought this might be useful." He opened the box, revealing old ship's lanterns patinated by salt and time. "They come from my grandfather's attic," he explained. "He was a sailor. I thought they would create an authentic atmosphere." Emily looked at him, touched by this gesture. "Thank you," she murmured. "It's exactly what we needed." He nodded, then, after a hesitation, asked, "Need help setting them up?" Together they hung the lanterns from the bookstore ceiling. Working side by side reminded them of other times, other shared projects. They carefully avoided personal subjects, focusing on the task at hand, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken words. "Why did you come back to Newport?" Emily finally asked, breaking the silence as they contemplated their finished work. Michael considered the question a moment before answering. "For the same reasons as you, I suppose. To know if the person I've become can make peace with the person I once was." Their gazes crossed briefly, then he smiled, that crooked smile she knew so well, which created a dimple in his left cheek. "Good luck for Saturday," he said, heading toward the door. "The whole town is already talking about it." Emily remained motionless after his departure, surrounded by the soft glow of the marine lanterns. For the first time since her return, she felt a familiar warmth spread in her chest, that sensation of anticipation that precedes new beginnings. The maritime storytelling evening transformed the bookstore. Michael's lanterns bathed the space in an amber glow, creating an almost magical atmosphere. The chairs arranged in a circle were all occupied, and some visitors had even sat on the floor between the shelves. An old local fisherman, Joe, told New England legends of mermaids and sunken cities in a grave voice that itself seemed to carry the imprint of the ocean. Children listened open-mouthed, while adults allowed themselves to be transported by these ancestral stories. Emily observed the scene from the back of the shop, her heart swelling with hope. Jessica approached, 2 glasses of local craft beer in hand. "It's a success," she murmured, passing a glass to her sister. "I haven't seen the bookstore so alive since Dad's readings," Emily completed with a nostalgic smile. The 2 sisters clinked glasses discreetly, sharing a moment of rediscovered complicity. Among the crowd, Emily spotted Michael leaning against a bookshelf, listening attentively to the stories. Their eyes met, and he inclined his head slightly in approval. At the end of the evening, as the last customers were leaving, the register showed encouraging sales, but more importantly, people had promised to return, to tell their friends about the bookstore, to participate in upcoming events. "It's just a beginning," Emily said, helping Jessica rearrange the chairs. "But it's a good beginning." The following weeks brought a new rhythm to the bookstore. Emily set up a book club, organized writing workshops, invited local authors for signings. Little by little, the place regained its soul, attracting both residents and curious tourists. One rainy afternoon, while sorting new arrivals, Emily discovered a book that made her stop short. Lost Horizons, a collection of poems written by Michael Bennett. The cover showed a desolate beach under a stormy sky. Trembling, she opened it and read the publication date, 3 years earlier, shortly after his return to Newport. That evening, curled up under a blanket in her old room, she immersed herself in Michael's verses. Each poem was like an open window to the soul of the man she had once known better than anyone. She recognized their story in it, transformed by distance and time, but still painfully present. The ocean, omnipresent in his writings, seemed to symbolize everything that had separated them. Vast, unpredictable, impossible to contain. The next day, she went to the sailing school. A fresh breeze was blowing from offshore, making the halyards slap against the masts of the small sailboats moored at the dock. Michael was teaching a group of children how to tie a bowline knot. When he saw her, he entrusted his students to a colleague and came to meet her intrigued. "I read your book," Emily said without preamble, holding out the collection she had brought with her. Michael appeared embarrassed, running a hand through his wind-tousled hair. "It's not very good," he said with a modesty that once would have been unlike him. "It's magnificent," she corrected. "Honest and painful and true." He turned his gaze toward the sea as if seeking refuge there. "Why did you never tell me you wrote?" Emily asked. "You were already gone when I started," he replied simply. A silence settled between them, filled by the cry of seagulls and the lapping of water against the hulls of boats. "I'd like to organize a poetry evening at the bookstore," Emily finally announced. "With readings from your book, people should know your talent." Michael shook his head. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Why?" He looked straight into her eyes for the first time since her return. "Because every poem is about you, Emily. About us. About what we lost." These words struck Emily like a wave, leaving her breathless. She hadn't been mistaken in reading between the lines, in recognizing their story in these verses about absence and longing. "All the more reason to share it," she gently insisted. "Art is born from truth, even painful truth." After a long moment, Michael slowly nodded. "On one condition, that we really talk, you and I. Not about this project, not about the bookstore, about us, about what happened." Emily felt her heart quicken. This was precisely what she had avoided since her return, this necessary confrontation with the past, with the wounds inflicted and received. "Agreed," she accepted, her throat tight. "Tonight, on the beach, like before." This was the decision that changed everything, that moment when Emily chose to face what she had fled from for 10 years, accepting that the only path to the future sometimes passed through the past one had tried to forget. The sun was slowly declining toward the horizon, tinting Newport's sky with gold and purple. Emily walked barefoot on the damp sand of Easton's beach, the sea breeze playing in her hair. She spotted Michael's silhouette in the distance, sitting on the rocks they had once called Our Spot. Her heart was racing as she approached. What remained to be said after 10 years of silence? How to explain choices that, even to her, sometimes seemed incomprehensible in retrospect? Michael rose at her approach. He had brought a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, a reminder of other evenings, other conversations by the water. "Some habits don't change," Emily remarked with a hesitant smile. "Some are worth preserving," he replied, handing her a glass. They sat side by side, watching the waves lick the shore in a hypnotic movement. The silence stretched between them, neither uncomfortable nor serene, just necessary. "Why did you leave without saying anything?" Michael finally asked, his voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, remembering that rainy night 10 years ago, the violent argument with her father who wanted her to take over the bookstore while she had just been accepted at a New York publishing house. Michael's ultimatum, "Stay here. Let's build our life together." The sensation of suffocation, of walls closing in around her. "I felt like my life was already written," she responded slowly, "as if I were just a character in a story others had composed for me. The girl who takes over the family business, who marries her high school sweetheart, who never leaves her hometown." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "It's not that I didn't want that life, it's that I wanted to choose it, not simply slide into it by default." Michael nodded slowly. "And me in all this? Didn't I deserve at least a goodbye?" The pain in his voice was palpable, reviving the guilt Emily had tried to bury for years. "You could have made me change my mind," she admitted. "And I needed to leave. I was a coward, Michael. I didn't know how to tell you that I loved you and that I still had to get away from you." A wave stronger than the others came crashing against the rocks, splashing them lightly. "What did you find in New York?" he asked after a moment. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Emily reflected on her life in the city, her apartment overlooking the Hudson, her stimulating work in publishing, her cosmopolitan friends, an existence she had built far from family expectations, stone by stone. "I found freedom," she replied, "independence, a career I love." She hesitated before adding more softly, "But some days when the sky is a certain blue or when I hear a New England accent in the subway, I wonder what might have been." Michael took a long sip of wine, contemplating the horizon as if seeking answers there. "I hated you for a long time," he confessed. "I left Newport a few months after you. I sailed to New Zealand on a cargo ship. I sought oblivion at the other end of the world." He gave a joyless laugh. "But the sea always reminded me of you, the color of your eyes when you were happy. Impossible to escape the ghosts we carry within." "Is that why you started writing?" Emily asked, touched by this revelation. "Writing was a way of talking to you when you were no longer there," he admitted, "of giving form to that emptiness you had left." The sun had almost disappeared now, plunging the beach into a bluish semi-darkness. The first stars were appearing in the clear sky. "And now?" Emily murmured. "What are we to each other after all this time?" Michael turned toward her, his gaze of deep blue anchored in hers. "Strangers who know each other by heart. Friends who no longer know how to talk to each other. Lovers who have learned to live without each other." There was in his voice a resignation that broke something in Emily. She had imagined anger, reproaches, perhaps even hatred, but not this quiet acceptance, this polite distance. "I'm sorry I hurt you," she said, tears in her eyes, "but I can't regret leaving. It was necessary to become who I am today." Michael gently placed his hand on hers, the first physical contact between them since her return. "I know," he said simply, "and somewhere, despite everything, I'm happy for you, for the woman you've become." This moment, under the nascent stars, marked a turning point. Not a step backward, not an erasure of past wounds, but the beginning of a new understanding, an acknowledgement that their paths, even separated, had shaped them in a way they couldn't have imagined at 20. They talked for hours, catching up on a decade of absence. Michael told her of his travels, his years of wandering before returning to Newport to care for his ailing father. Emily told him about New York, her professional successes, her personal failures too. When they parted that night, something had changed. A door, long closed, had opened slightly, not toward the past, but toward a future where they might perhaps exist in each other's lives, in a new way yet to be defined. The poetry evening drew an unexpected crowd to the bookstore. Chairs had been arranged between the shelves, and floating candles in bowls of salt water created an intimate atmosphere. Emily had carefully chosen the staging, wanting to honor the maritime essence of Michael's poems. Jessica observed the turnout with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. "I would never have believed that Michael Bennett, the turbulent kid who used to steal apples from our garden, would one day become the center of literary attention in Newport," she murmured to Emily. "People change," Emily replied, nervously adjusting the books displayed on a table at the entrance. "We've all changed." Her sister gave her a piercing look. "You and Michael, are you—" "We're talking," Emily interrupted. "That's already a lot after all this time." Michael's arrival ended their conversation. He was visibly nervous, clutching his worn copy of the collection, his eyes seeking Emily in the crowd. She gave him an encouraging smile. The reading began. Michael, at first hesitant, gradually found his voice. His words, freed from the pages, took on a new dimension, more alive, more vibrant. The audience listened, captivated, as he shared poems about absence, the sea as a metaphor for separation, lighthouses as symbols of distant hope. Emily, seated in the last row, felt each verse resonate within her. It was their story he was telling, transmuted by art into something universal that touched all present. She noticed silent tears on the cheeks of some listeners, recognizing in these words their own losses, their own regrets. After the reading, while Michael was signing copies and discussing with readers, Jessica approached Emily. "I'm beginning to understand," she said softly. "Understand what?" Emily asked, though she already knew what her sister meant. "Why you left, why it was necessary." Jessica looked at Michael, surrounded by admirers. "He would never have written these poems if you had stayed. You would never have acquired this experience in publishing that's saving us now. Sometimes separations engender beauties otherwise impossible." Emily squeezed her sister's hand, moved by this unexpected understanding. Since her return, it was the first time Jessica had acknowledged that her departure might have had meaning beyond the abandonment she had seen in it. Later that evening, when the last guests had left and Jessica had gone up to bed, Emily and Michael found themselves alone in the bookstore. He helped her put away the chairs, in a comfortable silence punctuated only by the sound of waves in the distance. "Thank you for tonight," he finally said. "I would never have had the courage to do this without you." Emily smiled. "You underestimate your talent. These poems deserve to be heard." Michael stopped, a chair in hand, and looked at her intensely. "Why are you doing all this, Emily? The bookstore this evening? You could simply sell and return to your life in New York." The question took her by surprise. Why indeed was she investing so much in a place she had fled? The answer formed slowly within her. "Because I'm beginning to understand that one can honor one's roots without being imprisoned by them," she replied. "That saving the bookstore isn't incompatible with the life I've built elsewhere. It's a part of me, like you, like this town. A part that I rejected for fear it would engulf me." She took a few steps toward the window, contemplating the lights of the town. "And maybe also because I need to repair what I broke by leaving, not to go backward, but to move forward, differently." Michael joined her by the window. The proximity between them was both familiar and new, like a familiar tune played in a different key. "After you left," he confessed, "I was afraid to come back here. Every street, every beach was impregnated with memories of us. But when my father fell ill, I had no choice. And I discovered that one can make peace with ghosts, that one can transform pain into something creative." He gestured toward the bookstore around them. "That's what you're doing now. You're transforming this place that suffocated you into something new, that finally resembles you." Their gazes met, and Emily was struck by the deep understanding she read in his eyes. Michael had always understood her, even when she didn't understand herself. It was both comforting and destabilizing. A knock on the window made them start. A man in a suit stood outside, waving what appeared to be documents. Emily recognized the representative of the bookstore chain that wanted to buy the property. "They don't give up easily," she sighed. "They sense something happening here," Michael replied. "They see the bookstore coming back to life, and it worries them. You represent what they can't buy, authenticity, the soul of a place." Emily felt a new determination fill her. This bookstore was more than a business to save. It was a symbol of resistance against uniformity, a space where personal and literary stories intertwined. "I won't let them win," she affirmed. "We won't let them win." Michael smiled, and in that smile Emily saw something that resembled pride. They were far from the young lovers they had been, transformed by time, trials, difficult choices. But perhaps this new way of being together, allies in a battle that transcended them, was exactly what they needed to heal old wounds. Outside, the tide was rising, and with it, a sensation of new possibilities. A month after her return to Newport, Emily found herself facing an unexpected decision. Her director in New York called one rainy morning as she was opening the bookstore. "Emily, we need you in London," he announced without preamble. "The International Book Fair starts in 2 weeks, and Sarah broke her leg yesterday. You're the only one who can replace her to represent the house." Emily felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension course through her. London. It was a major professional opportunity, a chance to meet international authors, to establish contacts that could transform her career. Under other circumstances, she would have accepted without hesitation. "I'm in the middle of an important project here," she replied, looking around at the bookstore that was beginning to come back to life. "My family—" "It's temporary, Emily," her director insisted. 2 weeks, 3 at most. And frankly, it's an opportunity that could earn you a promotion on your return." She promised to think about it and hung up, troubled. The entrance bell tinkled at the same moment, and Jessica entered, shaking her umbrella. "You look preoccupied," her sister noted, hanging up her wet coat. Emily explained the situation, carefully observing Jessica's reactions. She expected disappointment, perhaps even anger. After all, leaving now could compromise their efforts to save the bookstore. To her great surprise, Jessica simply nodded. "You should go," she said. "Really?" Emily was astonished. "But everything we've started here will continue during your absence," Jessica completed with a reassuring smile. "Emily, you're no longer the young girl who ran away 10 years ago. You come back, you help us, but your life is also elsewhere, and that's normal." Emily felt overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. This understanding that Jessica offered represented everything she had hoped for years. The acceptance that her departure wasn't a rejection, that her love for her family could coexist with her personal ambitions. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, impulsively hugging her sister. "Say that you'll bring us contacts of English publishers who might be interested in our maritime section," Jessica replied with a wink. "And maybe some exclusive books for the bookstore." That same evening, Emily visited Michael to announce her temporary departure. He was at the harbour finishing repairs on a small sailing dinghy. His expert hands manipulated the tools with a grace Emily couldn't help but admire. "London, eh?" he said after she had explained the situation. "The great European adventure." She scrutinized his face, looking for traces of reproach or worry, but found only quiet acceptance. "It's not like last time," she specified. "I'll be back." Michael wiped his hands on a cloth before responding. "I know. You're not running away anymore, Emily. It's different now." He hesitated, then added more softly, "I read somewhere that lighthouses aren't made to stay immobile, but to guide those who navigate. Maybe that's what we are to each other now. Lighthouses, not anchors." This image touched Emily deeply. It was exactly what she felt, the freedom to leave while knowing there was a place, people to return to. The days preceding her departure passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Emily organized the bookstore so everything could function in her absence, created an events calendar, even trained a local young student to help Jessica. The eve of her flight, as she was closing her suitcase in her old room, a doubt suddenly assailed her. What if history repeated itself? If this temporary departure became permanent? If she allowed herself to be absorbed by London as she had been by New York? This anxiety pursued her until morning, when she embraced Jessica in front of the bookstore, promising to call as soon as she arrived. Her sister placed a small package in her hand. "So you don't forget where you come from," Jessica said with an enigmatic smile. In the taxi taking her to the airport, Emily opened the package. It was a small leather-bound notebook, with on the first page a photo of the bookstore and an inscription in Jessica's handwriting. "Roots are not chains, they nourish you wherever you go." Emily felt tears come to her eyes. This simple gift symbolized everything she had sought, the recognition that her identity wasn't a prison, but a foundation on which to build. At the airport, one last surprise awaited her. Michael was at the gate, a small package in hand. "I didn't want to let you leave without a goodbye this time," he said with a smile. He handed her the package, an autographed copy of his poetry collection. The inscription simply said, "To the horizons that await us, together or separately." "Sir," Emily impulsively embraced him, breathing in his familiar scent of salt spray and wood, a scent that evoked everything she had left behind and everything she was now rediscovering. "Thank you for letting me go," she murmured against his shoulder. "It's because now I know you can come back," he replied simply. The plane was boarding, breaking this moment of intimacy. Emily boarded, settled by the window. As the plane taxied, she saw Michael remain at the window, his hand raised in farewell. But it wasn't a final goodbye, rather a pause, a breath in their shared story. As Newport receded below her, Emily was struck by a realization. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't fleeing. She was departing while remaining anchored, in the bookstore, in her renewed relationship with Jessica, in this complex connection with Michael that was evolving into something new. London awaited her, with its historical landmarks and frantic energy, but Newport, with its colonial charm and rhythm dictated by the tides, remained her port of call, not a prison, but a chosen refuge. London was exactly as Emily had imagined it, dazzling, chaotic, implacable. The days at the book fair followed one another at a frantic pace, meetings with literary agents, author presentations, international rights negotiations. In the evening, exhausted but stimulated, she collapsed in her hotel room in Covent Garden, with only the vertiginous view of the city's illuminated skyline for company. She called Jessica almost daily, getting news of the bookstore. Her sister seemed to be handling the situation with a new confidence, proudly recounting how she had organized a children's reading that had attracted more visitors than expected. "People are asking when you'll be back," Jessica told her during a call. "You've created something here, Emily, something that continues even in your absence." These words warmed Emily's heart. She'd always feared that her departure would mean failure, abandonment. Discovering that she could contribute while being elsewhere was liberating. With Michael, communication was different. They exchanged sporadic messages, he sharing a photo of a storm on the beach, she sending him the image of a poem written in chalk on a London wall. These small attentions weren't conversations, properly speaking, rather ways of saying, "I'm thinking of you, I see you, I keep you close despite the distance." One evening, as she was admiring the view from her hotel's rooftop terrace, her phone rang. It was her director in New York. "Emily, I have a proposal for you," he announced without preamble. "The London office is impressed by your work at the fair. They're looking for someone to lead their Department of American Literature. They want to meet with you tomorrow." The world seemed to stop for an instant. Emily stared at the lights of the city that never sleeps, trying to assimilate this information. A position in London. It was an exceptional opportunity, the kind that comes only once in a career. "It's unexpected," she stammered. "It's deserved," her director corrected. "You've always been our best editor. They're offering a substantial salary, an apartment in Bloomsbury. Think about it, Emily. It's an incredible chance." After hanging up, Emily remained motionless, troubled by the contradictory emotions assailing her. Professional excitement mingled with the anguish of having to make a choice: London or Newport, her career or her newly rediscovered roots, the future or the reconciled past. The next day, the meeting with the heads of the London office unfolded like a dream. They presented her with an ambitious project, creating a collection dedicated to contemporary American literature, with significant means and almost total editorial freedom. "We need someone who deeply understands American culture while having an international vision," explained the director, an elegant woman with silver hair. "Your profile is perfect." Emily listened, asked pertinent questions, discussed editorial strategy, all while a part of herself observed the scene from the outside. Who was this professional and assured woman, so at ease in this luxurious office with a view of Regent's Park? Was it really her, Emily Walker, who had grown up above a small New England bookstore? "We'll let you think about it," the director concluded. "But we hope for an answer before your departure." Back in her hotel room, Emily felt overwhelmed by doubt. She took out the notebook Jessica had given her and Michael's small poetry collection. These two objects represented everything she had found again in Newport: family, a form of complex love; roots she had tried to tear out, but that still nourished her identity. Her phone vibrated. A message from Michael. "The sea is particularly agitated today. It reminds me of your eyes when you're troubled. Is everything okay?" This simple observation, this way he had of knowing her despite the years and distance, brought tears to Emily's eyes. How could he sense her trouble from thousands of miles away? She wanted to respond, but words failed her. Instead, she dialed Jessica's number. Her sister answered quickly, with the familiar sound of the bookstore in the background. "Emily? Is everything okay? They've offered me a position here," she blurted out without preamble. "In London. An important position, with a good salary, an apartment." A silence followed this announcement. Emily held her breath, awaiting disappointment, perhaps even anger from her sister. "And how do you feel about it?" Jessica finally asked, her voice remarkably calm. The question caught Emily off guard. She had prepared to justify herself, to almost apologize. But Jessica was simply asking how she felt. "I'm lost," she admitted. "Professionally, it's an incredible opportunity, but I've only just found you again, you, the bookstore. And then there's Michael." "Emily," Jessica gently interrupted, "you don't have to choose between your career and us. We're no longer in the era when Dad imposed on you to stay. Things have changed. But the bookstore will always be here," Jessica affirmed with a confidence that surprised Emily. "What you started here continues. We can find solutions. Perhaps you could share your time between London and Newport. Use your English contacts to bring authors to us." This unexpected opening touched Emily deeply. The idea that she could have both, her career and her roots, had never seemed possible before. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Don't say anything now," Jessica advised. "Take time to listen to your heart. The right decision is the one that will allow you to look in the mirror each morning without regret." After this call, Emily felt strangely appeased. She went out into the busy streets of London, walking with no particular purpose. The city pulsed around her, vibrant with possibilities. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to choose between this urban energy and the peace of her native New England. Perhaps true freedom wasn't fleeing from one's roots, but learning to carry them with oneself wherever one went. Perhaps true adulthood consisted not of cutting ties, but of transforming them into something flexible, capable of extending without breaking. That night, sitting on the windowsill of her hotel room, contemplating London's skyline. Emily wrote at length in the notebook Jessica had given her. She poured out her doubts, her hopes, her fears. And gradually, as the words aligned on the paper, a new clarity emerged within her. She grabbed her phone and composed a message for Michael. The sea in me is also agitated, but I'm beginning to understand that certain storms are necessary to reveal what was hidden beneath the surface. We'll talk when I return. The response came almost immediately. I'll wait. Sailors know that even the most violent storms eventually calm. Emily smiled in the darkness. For the first time, the future didn't appear to her as a heart-wrenching choice between two incompatible lives, but as a canvas she could weave herself, integrating the threads of past and present into a unique pattern, her own. The last day of the book fair, Emily met an author who would change her perspective in an unexpected way. Jack Wilson, an American writer expatriated in London for 20 years, was presenting his latest novel, the story of a man divided between two continents, two cultures, two loves. After his presentation, Emily approached him to discuss a possible translation with her American publisher. The conversation, begun professionally, quickly veered into more personal territories. "You have that look," Jack remarked, sipping a coffee in a quiet corner of the fair, the one of someone standing on a threshold, hesitating between two worlds. Emily was surprised by this observation. "Is it so obvious?" He smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes testifying to a life rich in experiences. "I've spent 2 decades navigating between America and England. I recognize the signs of cultural tearing." Encouraged by this understanding, Emily confided her dilemma: the job offer in London, the family bookstore in Newport, her complicated relationship with Michael, her fear of having to choose again between two parts of herself. Jack listened attentively, nodding sometimes. When she had finished, he remained silent for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "Do you know what a third space is, Emily?" he finally asked. She shook her head, intrigued. "It's a concept developed by anthropologists," he explained. "The idea that between two cultures, two identities, a unique hybrid space can emerge, neither one nor the other, but something new, transformative. Immigrants like me constantly live it." He made a gesture encompassing the hall around them. "I am no longer completely American, but I will never be totally English. I exist in this in-between, and I have learned that it is a position of strength, not weakness. It allows me to see both worlds with a particular clarity." These words resonated deeply with Emily. Wasn't this exactly what she had always been seeking? Not to choose between New York and Newport, between her career and her roots, but to create her own space, her own identity that would transcend these oppositions. "How did you find this balance?" she asked, eager to understand. Jack's smile widened. "I stopped thinking in terms of or and started thinking in terms of and. It's not London or New York. It's London and New York, not ambition or roots, but both, feeding each other." He then told her about his own life between two continents, how he spent 4 months a year in a small New England village, writing in the family home, then returned to London to nourish himself on its urban energy. How he had created a bridge between these two worlds, bringing American writers to England, translating unknown English authors for the American public. "Your situation with the bookstore and this position isn't a dilemma," he concluded. "It's an opportunity to create something unique, a literary bridge between two worlds you intimately know." Leaving the fair that evening, Emily felt something change within her. Jack's words had illuminated her path with a new light. What she had always perceived as a painful tearing, this simultaneous belonging to two universes, could become her greatest strength. In her hotel room, she opened her computer and began writing frantically. Not a simple list of pros and cons, but a vision, a project that would transcend the simple question of where to live. She imagined how the Newport bookstore could become an outpost of English literature in New England, how her position in London could serve as a springboard for American authors in Europe. The hours passed, and at dawn, exhausted but exhilarated, Emily contemplated what she had created, the plan of a transatlantic cultural bridge, rooted in two soils, but belonging exclusively to neither. She fell asleep with a new clarity, finally understanding that her life had never been a question of flight or return, but of building a space that would resemble her, unique and hybrid. The next day, she met with the director of the London office to give her answer. But instead of a simple yes or no, she presented her vision, accepting the position while keeping an active link with the family bookstore, creating a transatlantic collection that would showcase voices from both sides of the ocean, organizing residencies for English writers in Newport and vice versa. "What you're proposing is ambitious," the director observed, visibly intrigued. "It will require a lot of organization, frequent travel." "I'm ready," Emily affirmed with a confidence that surprised her. "It's not a compromise, it's a synergy that will benefit both sides." After a long discussion about practical aspects, the director agreed to try the experiment. Emily would need to spend at least 6 months a year in London, but could organize her time between the two continents according to project needs. Leaving the building, Emily felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in her adult life, she had refused to let herself be enclosed in a single identity, in a single place. She had chosen complexity, the in-between, not as a painful compromise but as a creative space. She immediately called Jessica to announce her decision. Her sister let out a cry of joy at the other end of the line. "It's perfect, Emily. The bookstore will be your European home port. We can transform Dad's old office into a workspace for you," and Jessica's enthusiasm confirmed to Emily that she had found the right path. Her sister, whom she had always imagined as the embodiment of tradition, was now embracing this hybrid project with unexpected passion. "There's just one thing I need to know," Jessica said, her voice suddenly more serious. "Michael, what do you really feel for him?" The question caught Emily off guard. In all this reflection on her career and identity, Michael had remained present in filigree, a constant but blurred presence, like a lighthouse glimpsed through the fog. "It's complicated," she admitted. "Love always is," Jessica replied. "But you'll have to be clear with him, Emily." She laughed at her unintentional wordplay. "He deserves to know where he stands in this new life you're building." Emily knew her sister was right. If she now refused binary choices in her career, she couldn't continue to keep Michael in this ambiguous in-between. He deserved complete honesty, even if she wasn't yet certain what that honesty would reveal. The flight that would take her back to America was leaving the next day. That night, standing in front of her hotel room window, contemplating one last time London's skyline, Emily composed a message for Michael. "I've found a way to be both there and here. Now I need to understand if us can exist in this space between two worlds. I'm coming home tomorrow. Wait for me on our beach, at sunset." The response came almost immediately, simple and poignant. "I've waited 10 years. I can wait one more day." The return to Newport was different this time. When Emily stepped off the train, it was no longer with the apprehension of finding a past she had fled, but with the excitement of building something new on ancient foundations. Jessica was waiting at the station, frantically waving. The two sisters embraced at length, without the awkwardness that had marked their reunion a month earlier. "You look different," Jessica remarked, scrutinizing Emily's face. "I feel different," Emily confirmed, "as if I had finally found my place, or rather my places." On the way to the bookstore, Jessica told her about the developments of the last few weeks. The bookstore had continued on its positive momentum, attracting an increasingly loyal public. Literary events had become an anticipated rendezvous, and the book club now counted some 20 active members. "And guess who's become our most fervent supporter?" Jessica added with a mischievous smile. "Andrew Taylor, the representative of that chain that wanted to buy us out. He comes to every event, buys books, and last week he confided that he's considering leaving his position to open his own independent bookstore." Emily burst out laughing. "You're kidding." "Not at all. He says title pages reminded him why he loved books before he got lost in the business." This news comforted Emily in her conviction. The bookstore wasn't just a business, but a meaning-bearing place, capable of transforming those who entered it. Crossing the threshold of the shop, Emily was greeted by a surprise. A banner suspended between the shelves proclaimed, "Welcome to our transatlantic bridge." Under the banner, a small crowd applauded her entrance. Regular customers, childhood friends, and even old Joe, who had told New England legends during their first evening. "Jessica told us about your project," explained a woman Emily recognized as the local librarian. "It's exactly what our town needs, an opening to the world that respects our identity." Moved, Emily thanked everyone, explaining in more detail her vision of a literary bridge between New England and Europe. The enthusiasm she encountered touched her deeply. These people she had believed enclosed in their traditions were embracing the idea of change, of opening. But one person was missing from the group: Michael. Emily checked her watch. Sunset was approaching. She excused herself to the guests and headed toward the beach, her heart pounding. The sea was calm that evening, stretching like a sheet of bluish glass to the horizon. The sun was slowly descending, tinting the clouds pink and gold. Michael was sitting on their rock, contemplating the ocean, his profile silhouetted against the declining light. Emily approached silently, sitting beside him without speaking. For a few minutes they remained thus side by side, watching the sun melt into the sea. "I thought a lot during your absence," Michael finally said, breaking the silence. "About us, about what we could be now." Emily turned her head toward him, studying his face that she knew by heart, and that yet always seemed new to her. "Me too," she admitted, "and I understood something important. When I left 10 years ago, it wasn't just Newport or the bookstore I was fleeing. It was also this certainty I had about us, this idea that our story was already written, that we knew exactly what our future together would be." Michael was looking at her intensely, his eyes reflecting the last gleams of the day. "I needed to lose myself to find myself," Emily continued, "to discover who I was outside of us, outside of everything that seemed predetermined. And now—" "Now?" Michael gently encouraged when she broke off. Emily took a deep breath. "Now I think we could write a different story, not the one of two young lovers who know nothing other than their small town, but that of two adults who have lived, who have changed, who know what they want and what they're ready to give." She held out her hand to him, a simple gesture but laden with meaning. "I can't promise you I'll always be here. Part of my life will be in London, another in New York. But I can promise you to be truly present when I am with you, to build something authentic that respects who we have become." Michael looked at her outstretched hand, then at her eyes. "You know, for years, I believed that love had to be simple. Two people, one place, a shared life. Then you left and everything became complicated." He intertwined his fingers with hers before continuing. "But these last weeks, while you were in London, I realized that this complexity isn't an obstacle. It's the reality of who we are now, and perhaps it's more interesting this way." He took from his pocket a small object that he handed to her. A stone polished by the sea, traversed by a vein of white quartz that divided it into two distinct but inseparable halves. "I found this on the beach yesterday," he explained. "It made me think of us, two different parts but forming a unique whole." Emily took the stone, moved by this simple but deeply symbolic gesture. "Does that mean you're ready to try? To build something that won't resemble anything we've known before?" Michael smiled, that smile that had always had the power to reach her deeply. "I'm a writer now, remember? I like stories that go off the beaten path." He leaned toward her, hesitated an instant, then kissed her softly. Their first kiss in 10 years, at once strangely familiar and completely new. When they separated, Emily felt a quiet certainty invade her. This wasn't a step backward, not an attempt to recreate what had been. It was the beginning of something new, which would honor their shared past while embracing the people they had become separately. Hand in hand, they watched the first stars appear in the twilight sky. The lighthouse at the point lit up, projecting its luminous beam on the dark waters, guide for navigators, symbol of a fixed point in the moving immensity. "I don't know exactly how this will work," Emily admitted. "You here, me sometimes elsewhere. We'll invent it as we go along," Michael replied with a quiet confidence. Like all great voyages, one step at a time. They remained thus until night fell, talking of possibilities, shared dreams, literary projects that could unite their talents. The bookstore could welcome a space dedicated to Michael's maritime poetry, while he could occasionally accompany her to London for cultural events. On the way back to town, Emily realized that the fear that had inhabited her for so long, this anguish of having to choose, to sacrifice a part of herself, had dissipated. In its place grew a new excitement at the possibilities offered by this life between two worlds, this love between two people who had learned to accept each other in all their complexity. The following weeks were devoted to concretizing Emily's vision. The bookstore underwent a subtle but significant transformation. The back room, once a simple storage space, was remodeled into a bright office overlooking the sea, the Newport outpost of her London editorial work. A new section was created, baptized Crossings, a space dedicated to transatlantic literary exchanges, translations, travel narratives. Michael installed a small permanent exhibition of his poems, accompanied by maritime photographs taken during his travels. Jessica, for her part, seemed to be flourishing in this new role of daily guardian of the bookstore. She had developed an unsuspected talent for organizing events, attracting an increasingly broad and loyal public. "You know," she confessed to Emily one evening as they were closing the shop, "for years I felt bitterness toward you. I had the impression of having inherited all the responsibilities while you lived your dreams in New York." Emily froze, touched by this unexpected confession. "But now," Jessica continued with a smile, "I understand that we each had our own path to travel, and look where it has led us, to a place much more interesting than if we had simply followed Dad's initial plan." This reconciliation between the sisters was perhaps Emily's most beautiful victory. The gulf that had formed between them over the years had transformed into a bridge of surprising solidity. One June morning, as Emily was working on the manuscript of an English author she hoped to have translated into American English, Michael burst into her office looking excited. "I have an idea," he announced without preamble, "a maritime literary festival." Emily looked up from her screen, intrigued. "Go on." "Newport has always been a city of sailors, fishermen, explorers," he explained animatedly, "and now with your transatlantic project, we could organize something unique, a festival that would bring together writers from both sides of the ocean around the theme of the sea." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. It fit perfectly with the identity of the town while opening new perspectives. "We could organize it in September," Michael continued, "when you'll be back from your stay in London. The great equinox tides would create a perfect atmosphere." Emily felt enthusiasm gain her. "We could set up reading spaces on the beach, among the mansions, maybe even on boats in the harbour." They spent the morning sketching out the project, their excitement growing as ideas followed one another. This festival would be the perfect incarnation of their shared vision, rooted in New England identity, while opening to the world, mixing tradition and innovation. That same afternoon, they presented the concept to the town hall. The mayor, a progressive man seeking to energize the town's cultural image, was immediately seduced. This could become a major annual event, he enthused. Something that would distinguish Newport from other New England tourist destinations. The following weeks were a race against time. Emily contacted her connections in the world of international publishing, while Michael mobilized the local literary network. Jessica coordinated the logistics, transforming the bookstore into festival headquarters. But as the project took shape, a shadow hung over Emily's mind. July was approaching, and with it, her departure for 6 months in London. How to maintain this dynamic, this newfound proximity with Michael, when an ocean would separate them again? One evening, after a long day of preparations, Michael and she found themselves on the beach. Summer was in full swing, and the coast was animated with late bathers and strollers, enjoying the evening mildness. "I'm leaving in 2 weeks," Emily said, staring at the horizon where the sun was beginning its descent. Michael nodded, his face unreadable. "I know. I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. "Afraid that distance will destroy what we're rebuilding." He turned toward her, his gaze of deep blue anchored in hers. "Do you remember what I told you about lighthouses? That they're not made to stay immobile, but to guide those who navigate?" Emily nodded silently. "I'm not going anywhere, Emily," he continued. "I'll always be here, waiting for you. But not like before, not in pain and incomprehension. This time I'll wait for you knowing you'll come back, knowing that your departure isn't a flight, but a necessary journey." He took from his pocket a small leather-bound notebook, similar to the one Jessica had given her before her departure for London. "I thought we could write," he said. "Not electronic messages or texts, but real letters, pages of this notebook that we'll send to each other. Something tangible, old in form but new in content." Emily took the notebook, deeply touched by this gesture that so well summarized their relationship, a mixture of tradition and innovation, of anchoring and movement. "The first page is already written," Michael added with a slightly embarrassed smile. "A poem to launch you on Atlantic waters." That night, alone in her room, Emily opened the notebook and discovered the verses Michael had destined for her. It wasn't a lamentation on the coming separation, but a celebration of two paths that cross and move away to better find each other again, enriched by their respective explorations. The last line said, "Between two shores, our souls have learned that distance is not emptiness, but nurturing space. What we are separately, what we become together, in this dance of comings and goings that resembles us." Emily clutched the notebook to her heart, feeling a new certainty settle within her. Their love was no longer that fragile thing that could only survive in constant proximity. It had become more robust, capable of stretching across continents without breaking. The day of her departure for London arrived too quickly. This time, the whole bookstore community came to accompany her to the airport. Jessica, Michael, the book club members, even old Joe with his cane. "It's not a goodbye," Emily reminded them as she embraced them one by one. "It's just an until later that's a bit longer than others." Michael was the last to embrace her. "Navigate well," he murmured in her ear. "And don't forget to write in the notebook." As the plane took off, Emily didn't feel that tearing pain she had experienced 10 years earlier leaving Newport. In its place, there was a sweet melancholy mixed with excitement for what awaited her, a complex feeling but deeply alive, in the image of the woman she had become. London welcomed Emily with its characteristic energy, a whirlwind of noises, colours and possibilities that radically contrasted with New England tranquility. Her apartment in Bloomsbury, provided by the publishing house, offered an impressive view of the British Museum and surrounding streets. The first months passed at a dizzying speed. Emily immersed herself in her new role, patiently building her transatlantic collection, meeting authors and literary agents, negotiating translation rights. Each week brought its lot of exciting challenges and discoveries. But despite this professional effervescence, Newport was never far from her mind. Each evening she opened Michael's notebook, adding her thoughts, her observations on this English life, the parallels she discovered between the two cultures. Once a month, she sent the notebook to Michael, who returned it filled with his own reflections, poems and sketches of New England coasts. These epistolary exchanges created a continuous thread between their worlds, an intimate conversation that transcended distance. With Jessica, communication was different but equally regular. Weekly video calls allowed her to follow the bookstore's evolution, which continued on its positive momentum. Her sister had hired an assistant, a young student passionate about literature, to face increasing attendance. "The festival is taking shape," Jessica announced during one of these calls in August. "Michael is tireless. He convinced 3 renowned New England authors to participate, and the town hall has agreed to finance a floating stage in the harbor." Emily smiled, imagining Michael navigating among local institutions with his contagious enthusiasm. "I have good news too," she replied. 2 English authors I contacted have confirmed their presence, including Jack Wilson, the one I told you about. The festival, planned for the last week of September, would coincide with her temporary return to America. Emily had negotiated a month of remote work, allowing this extended stay in Newport for the event they had created together. But as summer advanced, a strange feeling began to insinuate itself within her. Despite her growing attachment to London, despite the professional successes she encountered there, she found herself counting the days that separated her from her return to New England. It wasn't nostalgia, not exactly. Rather, a progressive realization that her balance between two worlds imperceptibly leaned toward one of them. One September evening, while she was finalizing details of her imminent trip, her phone rang. It was Michael, which was unusual. They communicated almost exclusively through their notebooks and rare text messages. "Michael," she answered, suddenly worried. "Is everything okay?" There was a silence at the other end of the line. Then his voice, slightly different on the phone. "Emily, I have news. My poetry collection. It's going to be published in England." "What?" Emily sat up on her couch, astonished. "How? By whom?" "Thames Press," he replied, contained excitement in his voice. "Apparently one of the editors attended the poetry evening you had organized at the bookstore. He was on vacation in Newport. He bought a copy, read it, and—" "Michael, that's wonderful!" Emily exclaimed, sincerely happy for him. Thames Press was a small London publishing house renowned for its demanding editorial line and its commitment to quality poetry. "They want me to come to London," he continued, "for the book's release in November. I wanted to ask you if you could stay with me," Emily completed, her heart accelerating at this prospect. "Actually, they've offered me accommodation," Michael specified, "but I wanted to know if you'd agree to show me your London, to share this piece of your life with me as I share Newport with you." The request was simple, but laden with meaning. Michael, who had always been anchored in his New England territory, was taking a step toward Emily's world. He was crossing the ocean, literally and figuratively. "I'd love that," she replied softly. "There are so many places I want to show you, so many people I'd like you to meet." Their conversation continued late into the night, filled with projects and new possibilities. This English publication opened a door that neither had anticipated, the possibility that Michael, too, could find his place in this transatlantic world they were building. In the days that followed, Emily found herself looking at London with new eyes, imagining the city through Michael's gaze, wondering which places would inspire him, which encounters could enrich his poetry. At the end of September, she finally flew back to America, carrying in her luggage not only her personal belongings, but also this new perspective. Their story was no longer that of a woman between two worlds and a man anchored in only one. It was becoming that of two people learning to navigate between different shores together. The arrival in Newport, under a fine rain typically autumnal, seemed different to her this time. Not a return to origins, but simply a return home. For that was what this town had become, no longer a place to flee from or fear, but one of her dwellings. Michael was waiting for her under an umbrella, his smile illuminating his face despite the surrounding greyness. When he embraced her, Emily felt something unravel within her, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Welcome home," he murmured against her hair. "Which one?" she asked with a smile. "The one that's between us," he replied simply. "The one we create together no matter where we are." The Maritime Literary Festival began 3 days later, transforming Newport into a vibrant cultural crossroads. White tents were erected on the beach and between the mansions, welcoming readings, debates, and writing workshops. The floating stage in the harbour, illuminated in the evening, offered a spectacular setting for poetic performances. Tidal Pages was at the heart of the event, serving as headquarters for authors and a welcoming place for the public. Jessica, blossoming in her role as hostess, guided visitors with an ease that impressed Emily. "You're in your element," Emily noted as they prepared the bookstore for a signing session. Jessica smiled. "I've discovered that I like creating bridges between people, connecting readers to authors, stories to people who need them." Emily was struck by this formulation, creating bridges. Wasn't this exactly what she herself had sought to do, in her own way? Between two continents, two cultures, two versions of herself? The culminating point of the festival was a poetic evening on the floating stage, where Michael and Jack Wilson read extracts from their works, accompanied by a local cellist. The calm sea reflected the stage's lights, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Emily, seated in the first row, was moved to tears hearing Michael recite in American English, then Jack translate into British English, creating a poetic dialogue that transcended linguistic barriers. This moment perfectly incarnated the vision she had had in London, this third space where cultures met to create something new. After the festival, as autumn was gently settling on the New England coast, Emily and Michael took the habit of walking among the mansions at twilight. During one of these walks, facing the darkening sea, Michael suddenly stopped. "I think I understand now," he said, contemplating the horizon where sky and ocean merged. "What do you understand?" Emily asked, intrigued by his pensive expression. "Why you needed to leave," he replied, "and why, paradoxically, that departure allowed you to truly return." He turned toward her, his face partially illuminated by the day's last lights. "I always thought that love meant being constantly present, physically, in the other's life. But that's only part of the equation." Emily waited for him to continue, touched by this reflection that echoed her own inner journey. "True love," he continued, "is also allowing the other to move away, to grow differently, then to return transformed. It's creating a space where two people can be fully themselves, together or separately." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I'm eager to discover London through your eyes, to see this part of you that I don't yet know." Emily felt her heart fill with a quiet joy. The last barriers between them seemed to fall, replaced by a deep and mutual understanding. "And I'm eager to rediscover Newport through yours," she replied, "to see this town no longer as a cage but as a port of call." The sun had completely disappeared now, giving way to a starry sky of surprising clarity. In the distance, the lighthouse beam regularly swept the darkness, a constant reminder that fixed points existed even in the darkest nights. It was at this precise moment, in these historic streets facing the immensity of the ocean, that Emily had the absolute certainty of having found her way. Not a linear path leading from one point to another, but a constellation of places, people, and experiences that, together, formed a life fully her own. A year later, on a soft June morning, Emily contemplated the sea from the newly arranged terrace above the bookstore. The sun was barely rising, tinting the horizon with gold and pink, promise of a radiant day. The terrace had been Michael's idea, an open-air space where they could organize summer readings, writing workshops, or simply sit to contemplate the ocean that had so shaped their lives. The work had just been completed, just in time for the second Maritime Literary Festival that would begin in a few days. "Coffee," Michael's voice made her turn. He stood in the doorway, 2 steaming cups in hand, his hair tousled by the morning breeze. "Thank you," she replied with a smile, accepting the cup he held out. He came to lean against the railing beside her, following her gaze toward the horizon. "What are you thinking about so intensely?" Emily took a sip of coffee before answering. "About everything that's changed in a year. About everything that's changed in us." And the changes had been numerous, indeed. After the success of the first festival, title pages had acquired a renown that far surpassed the boundaries of New England. The bookstore had become a true cultural center, attracting readers and writers from all over America. Michael's collection had met with unexpected success in England, touching an audience sensitive to his maritime poetry imbued with universality. His trip to London had transformed into a mini-tour of readings in several British cities, considerably broadening his literary and personal horizon. As for Emily, she had found her rhythm between her 2 worlds. 6 months in London, 6 months in Newport, an alternation that, far from being wrenching, nourished her creativity and her unique editorial vision. Her transatlantic collection was taking shape, creating bridges between literary voices that, otherwise, would never have met. "You know what surprises me most?" said Michael, interrupting her reflections. "It's not that everything has changed, it's rather that these changes seem so natural now, as if our life had always been destined to take this particular form." Emily nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. What had seemed impossible to her once, this existence between 2 continents, this love that respected their distinct identities, had become their normality. "Do you remember what you told me about lighthouses?" she asked, turning toward him. "That they're not made to stay immobile, but to guide those who navigate." Michael smiled, remembering that conversation on the beach a year earlier. "I think that's what we've become for each other," Emily continued. "Not anchors that hold us in place, but lighthouses that allow us to navigate with confidence, knowing there's always a reference point, even in the darkest nights." He set his cup on the railing and gently took her face between his hands. "And now, where are we navigating?" The question wasn't trivial. Michael had received an offer to be writer in residence at Oxford University for a semester. This opportunity would mean they would be together in England for part of the year, an inversion of their usual pattern. "I think we continue to follow the currents that carry us," Emily replied. "Together when possible, separately when necessary, but always connected by that invisible thread that brought us back to each other, despite the years and distance." Michael kissed her softly, a kiss that contained everything they had gone through and everything that still awaited them. When they separated, he took a small box from his pocket. "I have something for you," he said. "Not a ring, not yet, unless you want it one day, but something that symbolizes what we've built together." Intrigued, Emily opened the box. Inside was a silver pendant representing a compass whose needle pointed not toward north but toward 2 directions simultaneously, east and west. "So you never forget that you belong to 2 horizons," Michael explained, and that whichever one you navigate toward, the other patiently awaits you. Emily felt tears come to her eyes. This simple object perfectly captured the essence of their relationship and the life she had finally embraced. Not a choice between two worlds, but the joyful acceptance of her belonging to both. "It's perfect," she murmured as he delicately attached the pendant around her neck. "Like us?" "Oh, we're far from perfect," he laughed softly. "We're complex, contradictory sometimes, always in movement. But perhaps that's precisely what makes our story so interesting." Below, the town was beginning to awaken. Fishermen prepared their boats in the harbor. Merchants opened their shops in the narrow streets. Newport was coming to life, immutable and yet in perpetual evolution, like the ocean surrounding it. Jessica appeared on the terrace, a tray of pastries in hand. "Inaugural breakfast for our new space," she proposed with a smile. The three settled around the small table Michael had crafted with his own hands, savoring the simplicity of this shared moment. "I received a call from the mayor this morning," Jessica announced, generously spreading jam on a still-warm croissant. "He wants our festival to become an official town event, with permanent municipal funding." "That's excellent news," Emily exclaimed. "And apparently," Jessica continued with a mischievous wink, "a certain Andrew Taylor has finally resigned from his chain of standardized bookstores to open his own independent shop in Providence." Michael burst out laughing. "The contagion of books with soul is spreading. We're creating emulators." "Bridges," Emily gently corrected. "We're creating bridges between people, cultures, ways of seeing the world." Jessica raised her coffee cup. "To bridges, then. And to the courageous people who dare to cross them." They clinked cups in the golden morning light, three people transformed by their choices, their journeys, their returns. Later that day, as Emily and Michael walked hand in hand on the beach, she suddenly stopped, struck by the simple beauty of the moment. The sand beneath her feet, the wind in her hair, Michael's hand in hers. "You know," she said, contemplating the horizon where sea and sky merged, "I spent so many years wondering where my place was. New York? Newport? London? And now I understand that the question was never where, but how." Michael encouraged her with a look to continue. "How to live authentically, honoring all parts of myself. How to love without possessing. How to leave without fleeing and return without imprisoning oneself." She touched the compass pendant resting against her skin. And the answer was there all along, in the very movement of the tides, this eternal ebb and flow that is neither an advance nor a retreat, but the natural breathing of the ocean. Michael smiled, understanding deeply what she was expressing. "Tides don't choose between the beach and the horizon," he observed. "They embrace both in their perpetual dance." "Exactly," Emily agreed. "And perhaps that's it, finally, the secret of a fully lived life, not anchoring definitively somewhere, but learning to dance with the tides that carry us." They resumed their walk, leaving their footprints on the damp sand, ephemeral traces that the next wave would erase, but that nevertheless testified to their passage, their presence at this precise moment. In the distance, the silhouette of tidal pages stood out against the blue sky, with its new terrace where a flag created specially for the festival gently floated, a stylized image of an open book on a wave, perfect symbol of their shared vision. Emily felt a quiet certainty settle within her, as solid as the town's mansions, and as fluid as the ocean surrounding it. She had found her balance, not in the immobility of a unique place, but in the harmonious movement between her different worlds. And Michael at her side, with his newly acquired patience and deep understanding, was not the anchor that held her back, but the companion who navigated with her, sometimes on the same boat, sometimes on separate crafts, but always guided by the same star. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her pensive expression. Emily smiled, squeezing his hand a little tighter. "I think that we're like the ocean and the shore, different by nature but eternally linked, transforming each other with each encounter." The sun was now high in the sky, illuminating Newport Bay in all its splendor. Before them stretched the Atlantic, this ocean they had learned to cross in both directions, physically and metaphorically, transforming what could have been a barrier into a bridge between their worlds. And in this perfect June light, Emily understood that true love wasn't the absence of separation, but the ability to create something beautiful despite distance. Like the horizon itself, that imaginary line where sky and sea seem to meet while remaining true to their own nature. "I love you," she said simply, these words carrying all the complexity of their story and all the promise of their shared future. "I love you too," Michael replied, his gaze reflecting the blue immensity stretching before them, across tides, seasons, and horizons.